The live stream chat is moving too fast to read. Dude, turn around! Behind you! Why is nobody saying anything about the tent? Cody Marsh doesn't see any of it. His phone is mounted to a chest rig, battery at 40%, flashlight beam cutting a shaky white cone through the black Oklahoma pines. It's 11:47 p.m. He's 40 minutes into what he's been calling, in his low YouTube narrator voice, the most haunted square mile in America, the abandoned grounds of Camp Nightingale, closed since August of 1974, the summer 3 counselors disappeared from a locked tent and were never found. He doesn't know that part. He read a Reddit thread. He knows the headline version. 3 counselors vanish, tent unzipped from inside, never found. That's enough for a video. He starts walking faster. The chat doesn't slow down. His flashlight keeps flickering. Watch it. 102:14. Look at the tent flap. Guys, I'm not kidding. Pause it right now. None of that exists yet in this moment in these trees. That's the thing about a haunting. It doesn't announce itself while it's happening. It waits until you're not looking. It waits until the footage is already recorded, already uploaded, already sitting in 10,000 browser tabs at 2 in the morning, and then, and only then, does it let itself be seen. Cody reaches the tent line. 6 platforms in a row, the canvas on 5 of them rotted through to lace, but the 6th, Bunk C, still has its shape, still has its zipper door, hanging half open on a rusted track, swaying very slightly, though there is, Cody notes out loud, like literally no wind right now, guys, like zero. Listen. He holds the phone up so the mic can catch the silence. It is total. No cicadas, no wind, no birds settling in the trees. The kind of silence that doesn't feel like an absence of sound so much as the presence of something holding its breath. Okay, Cody says, and his voice has dropped an octave, gone thin at the edges. Okay, I'm going to go in. He steps up onto the wooden platform. The boards don't creak. That's the detail he'll mention later in every interview, every follow-up video, every increasingly strange press appearance. The boards didn't creak. 40 years of rot, and they didn't make one sound. He reaches for the zipper, and somewhere behind him, from a tent that collapsed into a mound of black mildew and canvas rag 30 years ago, Bunk A, the girls' tent, the one that was supposed to be empty that whole summer because of a leaking roof, a voice, high and small and years too young for the woods at midnight, says, "Don't let them see you counted." Cody doesn't hear it, not really. On the original broadcast, his mic doesn't pick it up at all. Later, forensic audio analysts hired by 3 separate news outlets will disagree completely about whether there's anything there beyond wind hiss and a compression artifact. Cody, in the moment, hears something, flinches, says, "Did you guys hear that?" to a chap that is already screaming at him to run, and then, because he is 26 years old and built a career out of not running, he unzips the tent anyway. The feed cuts to static 4 seconds later. It comes back 9 minutes after that, Cody already a quarter mile down the access road, breathing so hard the mic distorts, saying over and over, in a voice that has stopped being a narrator's voice and become something much smaller, "I'm not going back, I'm not going back, I'm not going back." He never explained what he saw in those 9 missing minutes. Not to his channel, not to the reporters, not, according to his mother, to her. That's the hook. That's the 2 minutes that made Camp Nightingale famous again, 50 years after it should have been forgotten. Now let's go back. Let's go back to why the tent was unzipped from the inside in the first place, and why, on the archived footage, frame 610214. If you pause it just right, there are 4 shapes in that tent doorway. There were only ever supposed to be 3. Before it was a true crime footnote, Camp Nightingale was, by every account, an ordinary place. It sat on 90 acres of leased forest an hour outside a small Oklahoma town, on the shore of a reservoir the Girl Scouts Council had used since the Eisenhower administration. Cabins for the youngest girls, platform tents, wood floors, canvas walls, screened windows for the older ones, the ones who wanted to feel like they were really camping. A mess hall with a stone chimney that the current owners never bothered to tear down, because tearing it down cost more than leaving it to the weather. In June of 1974, 140 girls came through Camp Nightingale's gates over 3 two-week sessions. 14 counselors, most of them college girls working a summer job, ran the place under a camp director named Ruth Calloway, a woman who'd worked there for 11 years and later told an investigator that nothing had ever gone wrong at that camp. Not once, not a broken bone, not a snake bite that mattered. We were careful. The 3rd session started on August 4th. It should have been the easiest one, the smallest group, 72 girls, most of them the older campers, 12 to 16, the ones who didn't need as much watching. Karen Voss was 20. This was her 3rd summer at Nightingale. She was assigned Tent Row 3, Bunk C, with 2 other counselors, Denise Whitfield, 19, in her 1st summer, and a counselor the camp roster lists only as D. Ames. The 3rd woman, the one whose full name got lost somewhere between a fire that damaged the county records office in 1981 and a Girl Scouts Council that, after the closure, seemed to determine to make Camp Nightingale disappear from every filing cabinet it could find. 9 girls, ages 13 and 14, slept in the 3 tents on either side of Bunk C that week. It's their statements, taken the next day, taken again a week later, taken a final time 18 months later by a detective who never closed the case before he retired, that make up almost everything we actually know. They agree on this. It had been a normal night. Campfire, songs. A counselor named Karen told a ghost story that wasn't about the camp, some generic hookman story, the kind every camp counselor in America has told since 1950. The girls thought it was funny more than scary. Lights out at 9:30. The counselors made their rounds, checked each tent, said goodnight. Here is where the stories start to diverge. 6 of the 9 girls say they heard nothing unusual at all and woke up to the sound of Ruth Calloway calling for Karen, for Denise, for Miss Ames across a camp that had gone very quiet. 3 of the girls, from the tent directly beside Bunk C, close enough that their canvas walls nearly touched, say something different. They say that sometime after midnight they heard someone counting. Not talking, not humming, counting, a low voice, moving through numbers slowly, unhurried, the way you count if you were checking that everyone was in a room was exactly where they were supposed to be. 1, 2, 3, a pause, then again starting over. 1, 2, 3. One of the 3 girls, in her statement, said she thought it was Karen doing a head count and went back to sleep without worrying about it. Another of the 3 girls said the voice didn't sound like Karen's voice, didn't sound like any of the counselors' voices, said it sounded, and this is a direct quote preserved in the file, like somebody who didn't have a voice they used a lot and was borrowing one. The 3rd girl didn't say anything in her statement about the counting at all. She didn't say much of anything. She'd stopped speaking almost entirely by the time investigators reached her, and would not, according to her family, speak more than a few words a day for the following 2 years. At 6:15 a.m., a junior counselor doing the morning wake-up round found Bunk C's tent flap unzipped from the inside, the zipper pole resting on the interior side of the canvas, which meant that whoever opened it had been standing inside the tent when they did it. zipped it back up on the way out. Karen's bunk was empty, sleeping bag thrown back like she'd simply gotten up. Denise's bunk was the same. The third counselor's bunk, Aim's bunk, was different. Her sleeping bag was still zipped shut, still lying flat, as though nobody had gotten into it that night at all, or as though whoever had gotten into it had never really needed to be inside it in the first place. All three women's belongings were left behind. Wallets, a car key on Karen's nightstand, 12 feet from the parking lot where her car sat untouched for 3 more days before her parents came to collect it. Nothing was packed. Nothing was taken. Search parties worked the 90 acres and the reservoir for 6 weeks. State police brought in dogs, then divers. Then, when the trail produced nothing at all, a psychic that Ruth Calloway paid for out of her own pocket because she couldn't stand doing nothing anymore. Nobody found footprints leading away from the tent. Nobody found blood or torn canvas or a single physical sign that anything violent had happened at all. It was as if 3 grown women had simply stood up out of their sleeping bags in the middle of the night, walked to the door, and stepped out of the world. Camp Nightingale closed at the end of that week. It never reopened. The Girl Scouts Council let the lease lapse in 1976. The land sat, technically owned by a logging company that never logged it for the next 50 years. Long enough for the road to wash out, long enough for the mess hall roof to fold in on itself, long enough for a version of the story to calcify into the kind of local legend that gets told at slumber parties and eventually gets found by a 26-year-old with a chest-mounted camera and 400,000 subscribers. There's one more detail from the file that the news never really picked up because it didn't fit the shape of the story they wanted to tell. On the morning the counselors disappeared, camp records show there should have been 9 girls sleeping in the 3 tents around Bunk C. The morning head count, taken twice by 2 different staff members before the police arrived, came up with 10. Nobody could account for it. Every girl on the roster was found, alive, present, accounted for by name, and there was still, somehow, 1 extra child standing in that clearing at 6:20 in the morning, counted, and then within the hour, not there to be counted again. Ruth Calloway wrote it off in her later interviews as a clerical error made by frightened staff in the worst morning of their lives. She never fully believed that. You can hear it in the recordings. There's a pause every single time, right before she says clerical error. The pause of someone repeating a lie they told themselves so long ago that it's mostly become true. Cody Marsh found Camp Nightingale the way most of his videos started. A Reddit post in R Abandoned Places, 4 blurry photos taken by a hunter who'd wandered onto the property in 2019, a caption that said only, "Found this place off an old logging road. Didn't stay long. Something felt really wrong about it." He'd built his channel, Marsh After Dark, on exactly that kind of feeling. 3 years, 400,000 subscribers, a formula that worked. Find a real abandoned place with a real dark history, walk it alone at night, live stream the whole thing unedited so people couldn't accuse him of faking anything, then clip the scariest 90 seconds for the algorithm the next morning. He'd done asylums. He'd done a drowned amusement park in Ohio. He'd done a house in Georgia where, allegedly, a family had vanished in 1962, and that video had 4 million views and a comment section full of people insisting they could see something moving in an upstairs window that Cody, watching it back a dozen times, genuinely could not see himself. He researched Camp Nightingale for 3 weeks, found the newspaper archive, found a woman on a genealogy forum whose grandmother had been Ruth Calloway's neighbor, who told him unprompted that Ruth used to say the camp took something with it when it closed and never gave it back. Found the property records, found with some difficulty that the land technically still belonged to a shell company nobody had checked on in a decade, which meant, practically speaking, nobody was going to stop him from walking onto it. He told his girlfriend he'd be back by 2 a.m. The live stream started at 11:58 p.m. on a Friday in October, viewer count climbing the way it always did for his premieres, 4,000, 9,000, 22,000 within the first 20 minutes, chat scrolling with the usual mix of jokes and genuine unease that always showed up whenever Cody found a place that actually looked bad as its reputation. And Camp Nightingale looked bad, worse than the photos. The mess hall roof had finished collapsing sometime in the last 5 years. Half the building was open to the sky, rain-rotted tables still set up in rows like the girls had just stepped out for a swim break 50 years ago and would be right back. The reservoir, visible past the tree line, sat black and flat and utterly still, no insects skating its surface, which Cody noted on camera and which several thousand viewers immediately started theorizing about in chat. He worked his way toward tent row 3 the way he built every video, slow, narrated, milking every creak and shadow. But underneath the performance, something in his actual voice had started to change by minute 30. Chat noticed it before he said anything about it. "Bro sounds scared for real, not like usual," someone wrote at 11:22. "His breathing is different," someone else added 2 minutes later. He reached the tent line at 11:44. What happened over the next 3 minutes is, at this point, the most analyzed 3 minutes of amateur horror footage on the internet. More picked apart than the Georgia House video, more argued over than any single clip from any paranormal show that's aired in the last decade. Because unlike almost everything else in that genre, nobody, including 3 separate forensic video teams hired by 3 separate outlets, has ever been able to prove it was faked. The counting starts at 11:44:52. It's faint. It's under the ambient hiss of the mic, under Cody's own breathing, under the specific dead silence of a place with no wind and no insects. But it's there, and once you know to listen for it, you cannot stop hearing it. A voice, low, patient, moving through numbers. 1, 2, 3. A pause exactly as long as the pause in the 1974 witness statement, though Cody, at the time, had no way of knowing that detail. He hadn't read that part of the file, because that part of the file was never printed anywhere he could have found it. It only surfaced later when a retired detective's daughter, watching the viral clip with her father, called a news station because she recognized the rhythm of it from her father's old case notes, which he'd kept, against protocol, in a box in his garage for 40 years. 1, 2, 3. "Okay," Cody says on the footage, and you can hear him trying to sound like the version of himself that does this for a living and failing. "Okay, that's probably an animal, or, He reaches bunk C. The canvas sways. The zipper hangs open on its rusted track, the pole resting, as it has for 50 years, on the interior side of the fabric. He climbs the platform. The boards don't creak. And then, from bunk A, the collapsed tent, the empty tent, the tent that in 1974 was supposed to be closed for a leaking roof and had no counselor assigned to it at all. The small voice says the line that would end up printed on t-shirts within a month, screamed as a meme, dissected in 1,000 slowed-down, pitch-corrected YouTube analysis videos. "Don't let them see you counted." The stream doesn't catch it clearly. What it catches, clearly, unmistakably, agreed upon by every audio engineer who has ever examined the file professionally, is this: at 11:45:31, Cody's own breathing stops for 1 full second. Not held, not paused on purpose, but stopped. The way breathing stops when a body registers a threat before the mind has finished understanding what it's looking at. And at that exact same timestamp, in the frame that half the internet has now studied harder than the Zapruder film, the shadow inside the open tent doorway, which for the previous 41 seconds of footage has clearly, unambiguously been the shape of nothing at all, just black canvas and blacker night, resolves for 6 frames into the shape of a small figure, standing just inside the doorway, facing out. Cody unzips the tent the rest of the way. The feed cuts to static. It comes back at 11:54:47. Cody is running. The chest rig camera bounces hard enough that most viewers watching live initially assumed the feed had glitched into some kind of stress test pattern rather than actual footage. Trees strobing past too fast to focus on. His own ragged breathing louder than anything on the audio track. A sound underneath it that a lot of people later would swear was a second person breathing, out of sync with Cody's own rhythm, though the professional analysis on this point has never reached consensus. "I'm not going back," he says over and over, the words losing their shape the more he repeats them, until by the 10th or 11th time it's barely language at all, just breath forced into the same 3 syllables because his mind has nothing else to give it. He doesn't stop running until he reaches his car, a half-mile down the logging road. The stream continues for another 6 minutes after that. Cody in the driver's seat, doors locked, hands shaking too hard to get the key into the ignition on the first 4 tries, chat exploding beneath him with a mixture of panic and disbelief, and from a subset of viewers who assumed even now that this had to be a bit, gleeful excitement that Marsh After Dark had finally topped itself. He never says on stream what he saw in the tent. He says, at one point, staring straight into the camera with an expression that his most devoted fans would later describe as the first completely unguarded moment they'd ever seen from him in 3 years of content. There were 4 of them. Nobody in chat in the moment understands what he means. 4 of what? 4 shapes? Someone asks him to clarify, and he doesn't answer. He starts the car. The stream ends deliberately at 12:07 a.m. Not a crash, not a dropped connection, but Cody reaching up and manually ending the broadcast. The last thing visible on the archived footage, his own hand coming toward the lens. He never posted the next day, or the day after. His girlfriend, in the one interview she ever gave, said she came home at 1:45 in the morning, sat on the edge of the bed still in his boots, and didn't speak for almost an hour. When he finally did, he asked her a single question, and then wouldn't explain why he'd asked it, and never brought it up again. He asked her, if someone's been counted once, does counting them again undo it, or does it just make it worse? She had no idea what he meant. Neither really does anyone else, except for anyone who's read deep enough into the Camp Nightingale file to find the one detail that never made the papers, the extra child in the morning head count, the 10th girl, present at 6:20 a.m., gone by 7 a.m., never claimed by any family, never matched to any camper on the roster, written off by a camp director who spent the rest of her life not quite believing her own explanation.
The footage went up automatically. Cody's channel was set to auto-archive every live stream the moment it ended, a setting he'd forgotten was even active, and by the time he might have thought to take it down, 400,000 people had already watched it live, and the clip had already been ripped, re-uploaded, and stitched into 4 dozen reaction videos. It's the archived version, not the live broadcast, but the recorded file, sitting untouched on the platform's servers, where the real anomaly shows up. And it's the kind of anomaly that has kept this story alive on the internet for longer than almost anything else in the genre, because it doesn't rely on anyone's testimony. It's just sitting there in the file, time-stamped, reproducible, the same every time you press play. At 61:02:14 into the archived stream, long after Cody has driven away, long after the broadcast has technically ended on his end, in a stretch of supposedly dead air that exists only because his phone kept recording locally for several minutes after the live feed cut out, footage that uploaded automatically along with everything else. The frame shows the tent line at Camp Nightingale, Empty. No one there. The phone must have been sitting in the car, angled just enough through a gap in the dashboard to catch a sliver of the tree line half a mile away, an accident of geometry nobody would have planned or noticed if the internet hadn't spent 4 months slowing the footage down frame by frame, looking for exactly this kind of accident. In that sliver of frame, in the tent doorway of Bunk C, there are 4 shapes. 3 of them are small, roughly the size, several analysts have noted, with the specific clinical carefulness of people trying very hard not to sound insane, of a child between the ages of 12 and 14. They stand close together, facing the camera, facing the half-mile of dark trees between themselves and a lens they should have no way of knowing exists. The 4th is taller, positioned slightly behind and above the other 3, the way an adult stands behind a group of children being photographed, a hand resting. This detail shows up consistently across every stabilized, upscaled, AI denoised version of the clip that different research-minded corners of the internet have produced, on the shoulder of the child standing furthest to the left. None of the 4 shapes were visible during the original broadcast. Cody's live footage of the tent line, recorded from ground level 30 minutes earlier, shows nothing in that doorway but shadow. Whatever this is, it appears only in the archive, only after, only once nobody in the moment was watching closely enough to see it happen. Viewers who go looking for an explanation find, eventually, the same detail that made the retired detective's daughter pick up the phone, the extra girl in the 1974 head count. 10 campers counted at 6:20 a.m., 9 campers on the roster, 1 child present and accounted for, and then simply not there anymore. The same way 3 counselors had been present and accounted for, and then simply not there anymore 12 hours earlier. Nobody knows who she was. Nobody has ever known who she was. If you spend enough time in the comment sections and the forum threads and the increasingly elaborate video essays this footage spawned, you'll find no shortage of theories that she was a runaway from a neighboring county who'd wandered onto camp property and gotten swept up in a head count that didn't know to exclude her, that she was a girl who died at the camp years earlier and had simply somehow always been there, counted and uncounted on a rotation nobody understood, or that the counting voice heard by 3 girls in 1974 and heard again by Cody's microphone 50 years later belonged to her, and that what it was counting each time, patiently, without hurry, starting over every time it reached 3, was never the campers at all. It was the counselors. 1, 2, 3. 3 counselors assigned to Bunk C, 3 counselors gone by morning, and on Cody's footage 50 years later, 3 small figures standing in a doorway with a 4th figure's hand on the shoulder of the one on the left, the same configuration, some have pointed out, as you'd get if you were trying, after 50 years, to finally make the numbers come out even, to finally, after half a century of an uneven head count that never stopped bothering whoever or whatever was doing the counting, complete the group. Cody Marsh took his channel dark 11 days after the stream. His last public statement, a single unedited clip posted without commentary, without music, without the practiced narrator's cadence that had built his career, is 14 seconds long. In it, he sits in a car he never identifies, in a location he never names, and says only this: "I looked in that tent because I wanted content, and something in there looked back at me like it had been waiting for somebody to finally come count it. I don't think it was waiting for me specifically. I think it's just been waiting, and I think it's still counting. I'm not going to be the one who makes the numbers work. I'm sorry. That's it. That's the video." He has not posted since. The shell company that technically owns the 90 acres where Camp Nightingale once stood has, as of this year, still made no move to sell it, develop it, or post a single new sign warning people to stay off the property. The old signs remain,
half swallowed by kudzu, girls 8 to 16 fading under 50 years of Oklahoma sun. The tent at Bunk C is still standing. It shouldn't be. Canvas doesn't survive 50 years of open weather. Not really. Not the way the rest of Tent Row 3 has already surrendered to rot and collapsed into the ground. But it's still there, in every satellite photo anyone's bothered to check. Upright, intact, the zipper still hanging open on its rusted track, exactly the way it was found on the morning of August 12th, 1974. Waiting, some say, for somebody to zip it closed. Waiting, others say, for the numbers to finally, after 50 years, to come out right. Nobody has gone back to check which one it's waiting for. Not yet. If you're reading this after watching the archived footage yourself, do me a favor, don't go looking for the fourth figure in the doorway. Some numbers aren't meant to be counted twice.